and we should always be judged by progress and not by pure quantity, right? So connecting bubbles, we don't really know what the meaning. Yeah, figure out. I'll tell you. So its own virtue. Uh, the bottom, right? So it's okay. The spirit sa word. It's willing to impose itself in other. Intellect is the part that understands, okay? The part that comprehends, that seeks the truth, that seeks to understand, that seeks knowledge. Okay? Now if we translate that, so justice is when the appetites feed the body, okay, the spirit seeks to act in the world to realize the person in the world, and the intellect, based on its understanding of the truth and the good, orders the spirit and the appetites to act only according to how they will realize the common good of the whole body. But the common good of the whole body is when the whole person is oriented towards the good, is able to realize the good itself. Okay. And I think I explained to you how every being, you have to remind me of it if I didn't explain this to you already, or if I already said this, because I also teach the same thing to philosophy majors, and sometimes I get confused where we're at. Okay. I mean, who I said what to. Okay. But yeah, when we see that the human being's fullness is when they realize their whole self according to the call of the good. So that's the feeling the first time. Okay. Yeah, you know what? You remember we already talked about the state. Okay, sorry, but just as a review, the state is the same. Okay. So okay, the person. Okay, my appetites are supposed to serve my realization as a whole person oriented towards realizing the good. Okay. So participating in the good means living my life according to what the good calls me to be as my own perfect self. So I really call to the good. And the call comes from the intellect's participation in the good. So the intellect guides the appetite so that when the appetites are are act, when the appetites act, in order, in other words, when they consume, okay, and they do only so much so that the body is preserved and the body is oriented towards the good. Okay. So that's why, like, how like in the um in the different orders, I mean the different constitutions sometimes, or when the saints write their what do you call those? Anyway, their orders. Like the order of Saint Benedict. Not the, the his constitution, right? For the Benedictines. They say stuff like when they give actual, sometimes they give actual prescriptions about how to eat, right? So like when you're eating, yeah, you're eating to fulfill your body. But there's a way of eating that orients the body towards the good or the holy. In the case of religious persons, the good is the holy. So there's a way of eating and seeking food and desiring food that will lead you towards the holy. I know the perfect example. I don't know if all of you really. Yes. Oh, I did not know that. I can't believe the Chinese. Your mothers. Yeah, I know. You're both me and very steady. I didn't know you Jesuit. Okay, anyway. My first Myanmar is Jesuit. Are you? How many have you been here? Two of us. No, but that's it. That you're the first two to study here. Yeah. Wow. I've not been more. Who's around Europe? Ah, yeah. Cool. That is nice. That's the first time I had Myanmar is Jesuit. I didn't know. Anyway, Yeah, so since there's no Jesuits here, so but you guys look it up. Since they don't have. But the first principles and foundations, I mean, okay, I'm going to simplify them, but the first principle for foundations basically is and each person lives according in with the knowledge that God loves them, that they're sinners, but God loves them. And the only purpose of their life is to love God back, to show God and that love and to realize their love for God. Okay. So part of the first principles and foundations is you will love God's creations, but only so much as they lead you to God. Right? Right? So that's basically how intellect will guide the appetites in the spirit. Right? Because like, I mean, if that's right, that you only love, you will love, won't reject the world. That's what I love. But Cindy could just say reject the world. No, he says love the world. I love the world. You see, God in all things, right? But love the world only so much as the world will orient you towards loving God, to live a life of loving God. So, um, the whole the whole movement of the intellect is that it orients the appetite such that okay, so you desire to to consume food and just it's not. They even have a cookbook. Right? There's a Filipino Jesuits came up with a cookbook. Something is very good. Anyway, Jesuits can love food. They can also love um they can also love some physical um pleasures such as hmm, like experiencing nature, walking around, looking at things, right? That's filling your senses, right? Sure. And then that's your appetite. Sometimes your eyes and your ears seek to be filled with the sounds of nature, right? But but if the intellect is guiding, if reason is guiding it, then reason is saying there's a way of appreciating it that orients you to God versus worshiping food or worshiping your appetites, right? Because you could really be serving your appetites, loving your appetites, and that's that. That's the first. And then spirit is like how you want to act in the world, right? You want to start to be Jesuits, sorry, but Jesuits are pretty good example. Right? But especially Jesuits, right? Because Jesuits are always, um, themselves in every day, right? From politics to arts to whatever. Like Jesuits in the Philippines, they're involved in education, they're involved in policy, living according to first principles and foundations. The intellect will just have to be asked, are you doing this for the love of the Lord? suggesting there's no God, and it's not put in service Jesuits and other because the Jesuit and the things go towards the good. But you know when the order said, and I think the Vatican finally said, no, can't run for office anymore. He had to resign, I think. The Vatican, they told it to resign. Wow, in obedience, he just did it. But that's the lesson in obedience. But anyway, I don't know if that's my movie. I really is oriented or the or read their appetite. But everybody started here. I'm sorry. Justice is achieved when your experience and but an intellect oriented person. Now think of it in terms of state. Okay? Justice is achieved in the state, and every part is serving the good because the philosopher kings of the guardian class actually guide every part so that every part is oriented towards the good that the intellect introduces. Okay? So like I said in my last class, pretty sure it was in the last class here. When I said in the last class that if you can imagine how your orders, right, each one of your orders are actually oriented towards the good. Um that's how they are structured. Because the ones who created them, the ones who created the structures of the intent of your intellect, I'm sorry, the ones who created the structures of your orders were, people whose reason was guided, oriented towards the good. So theoretically. So yeah, when they were, is that a camera? Yes. Yeah, that's one thing. Anyway, yeah, so everyone is oriented towards the good. So, wow. Sorry, I got so impressed by the camera. I thought it wasn't working. Okay, anyway, um, yeah, so when we are oriented towards the good, all of us are given a capacity to realize ourselves according to how we are called by the good to be collectives oriented towards the good. So like I said, when you're acting in your own small way, even if you're not the ruler, each one contributes. Realize. So you know what? If the porter in LSP is really doing her job well, um, even if she's not a religious, which she isn't, right? But she's not a religious, but because she the work of the Jesuits, by being an employee in the NSA, she does her work. She's guided by Aristotle's right? Then that person really becomes that person that works at the first time. Uh, the people that work. Yes. Wow. They're so impressed. Oh, yeah. But guys, right? And so class in the morning, what are you doing on that space? Yeah. Just make it automatic. Whenever there's a class in the mornings, then you didn't use carbon. See, so happy. Even if you stay in the jeep, you're still there. With towards the good, no matter what you're doing. First in acting up. Yes, but yeah, it's like oh, yes, yes. Oh, I'm honest. Okay. Then that's fine. I think camera here, right? Let's use the camera and the computer. At least they'll see my side. I'll try to face here a lot. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's better. That's better. Okay. Anyway, yeah, so okay. Basically that's the idea of Plato, and that's why we can see how it makes sense for him to have an aristocracy. And I guess Plato is a really good idea for Catholics. We believe very much in in leaders. Right? But you know, okay, just to say that no, this is really great if people are if there's really a possibility people in the good and live according to the good, then Plato's framework will work very well. The only problem is when people are flawed and they can't really act according to the good. I mean, they do act according to the good, but because of power and weakness and temptations and all of that, of course, they need checks and balances. And that's the problem with Plato's theory, right? If it was so, then it would be perfect. But then it's not so. People still act. in a broken way. Right? Just as an example, I think, I hope this doesn't disillusion you, but just as an example, Gandhi, who everyone should revere, is a great spiritual leader and a great hero. I don't think he's a very good father or a very good husband. Oh, maybe he was a husband, but for sure he wasn't. He 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 failed his son, I think, because his son was very bitter about his father, and I think he actually joined a party that was anti Mahatma Gandhi. Because yeah, he didn't. I guess he didn't feel love or whatever, right? I'm sure our saints also who have had great flaws, right? Um, that's why we're always happy. And oh, for sure, popes, right? It's collected, right? That's why there must be, because you are not perfect. Okay. But you understand now why Plato's, I hope you understand now why Plato's idea of the state as a body is important. We talked about this already. Okay. Now, this is what we want to about now. Human existence is oriented towards dwelling in the realm of the idos and the real order of the world, the real world that bears the order of reality. This is why reason has to guide, because reason is the only aspect of ourselves that can know the real world, the really real that bears the order of reality. So it bears the order that makes things be as they ought to be. This is the realm of the good. So if you think about for Plato, okay, wait, do I talk about the allegory of the cave already? Okay, sorry. Hmm. Ayun, here. Right? So the citizenry provides their needs, but more importantly, the need to be human. Okay, so we come, because diba in the beginning it says, why do we come together at all this? Oh, because we can provide for our own needs, right? But what I've been trying to explain to you in the last three meetings is that it does provide basic needs, but more importantly, if it's a just state, in other words, run by people whose orientation is the good and is framed by the understanding of the good and structures that lead to the good. If it's so, then the state does not only provide everyone's basic needs, provides the need to be fully human. That's basically what the state provides. The need to be fully human. So if the policy is oriented towards the good, the citizen so that we're going to now explore what we call um the allegory of the cave. Oh, sorry. No, not yes. Okay. Are you sure? Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. I get it. Sorry. Anyway, I really tried to solve that by changing the background, but it's still good. Yeah. Anyway, so according to Plato, this is how Plato understands human existence. Things. How Plato understands human existence. He has this allegory where there's these human beings who live in a cave. Okay, they live in a cave. Then if we were the one in the same direction, and we'd be facing this direction, and we couldn't turn our heads in all our lives. That's how we live. And then behind us, I'm telling you literally how to describe it. behind us, there are these people, and there's a ledge behind us with a big light source. There's a source of light behind. So maybe the entrance of the cave, right, where the light comes in. So maybe there's that. So there's the entrance of the cave with the light source, and then there's a ledge, and then people pass in the ledge, bringing cutouts, like paper, like the wayang, right? The puppets, they bring puppets made of people, the pigs, horses, of trees, mountain, yeah. Anyway, so you can imagine. So we're all watching a shadow, okay? And all our lives, that's what we see. All we see are the shadows. Okay. And then for Plato, what happens is that what if one day the spell breaks? Actually, it doesn't say spell, it says chains. But I cannot imagine but staying on just staying there without and surviving without being in a spell. So good. It's they're in a spell. What if the spell breaks? Or the chains or anything like that? And then one person's able to leave the cave, like by accident, stumble out. What will the first reaction be? Then his eyes will be blinded because they're not used to the sunlight, right? And bit by bit, he sees shadows, and then he sees actual figures, right? And then there's so much beauty in it. Then it's like, is this really the real thing or the one we see in the cave, the real thing? Then afterwards, after he spent some time getting used to seeing that thing, he sees that they are all illuminated by the sun, the source of light, which makes all things visible. Okay? Okay, so the story goes back to the cave. This is basically Socrates, right? Sees the light. He goes back to the cave and he tells people, hey, what you're seeing isn't really real. There's a much better thing out there. Come on, come with me. Let's see that. But that's kind of what happened to Socrates, right? And that's not what you're seeing. It's real. Come with me. Let's look at the real thing out there. But they don't want to see what's out there because because for them the really real are the shadows. So really feel like one of these guys could see, but it's okay to remember. Now if you can imagine children who were raised in a house where they were not allowed to go out, but that's their life, it's their house. And then there are TV screens maybe all over, and that's all they can see of the outside world. And then in the TV screens, they're projecting maybe Korean novelas or action movies or Marvel movies or American sitcoms, whatever. Okay. But when you look at reality in the TVs, and then they see it, they're gonna think that's the real thing, right? In fact, you don't have to imagine it, but you don't have. Also, Chinese drama is pretty clear, right? But I don't know what happens only in Korea. But anyway, Chinese and Korean drama, Asian dramas are a big deal, right? Even in the West. So there's this phenomenon of women going to Korea, trying to find a man to fall in love with them, who's like in the Korean dramas. Okay? But they realize Korean men are really sometimes very abusive and not caring, and they don't cry. They travel men who cry a lot at the feelings. They realize, oh, it's Korean men in real life, they're not like that. I wonder how they feel also about the Chinese language like this time. They're very sensitive. Anyway, um, but my point is, but it's true, huh? I mean, for us, it would probably be ridiculous, but these guys just watch Korean dramas, a lot of them nonstop, right? Where they see that the movie is so nasty, it is a backstory. And then they'll see that, and that they really felt that that was the reality of Korean men. That was the truth. about Korean men. So they really went to Korea to be with Korean men, and then they're so disappointed by the reality that they beat up soccer. But but that's the thing. That's exactly how they live in states, right? And show the reality. Actually, I think Plato also um, somewhat predicted, no, or is describing potentially social media, right? Because that's what we're saying today, right? People in social media just see what the algorithms make them see based on their interests. So they only see what the same people like to see, and then they pass it on to each other, and then they watch the videos, they read the articles, they read the blog posts, all telling because they all live in what some people have called echo chambers, right? Because they just echo what they think, but they live in a cave where they don't speak reality. Nobody steps outside. Nobody steps outside and looks at the real world. Now, that's why Socrates is having a very. That's why Socrates says no, sorry. But Socrates says that's how all of us, right? That's his basic idea that we all live our real responsibility. I never see the review, right? So, like for instance, um, many of us think that human existence is achieved because of this. Like for instance, many of us, like I hear, I don't know if I agree with you, but you guys are bad with it. But I hear that the reason we're very oriented towards showing wealth is because of Confucianism. Because they say that because Confucianism is very much or what's that? It's kind of no status, right? Status. Those they like showing high status and all of that. But they say it's because of Confucian philosophy where it's so important to be a person who has status. Is it true to that? Do you see that in your status oriented cause of Confucianism? That's what a lot of Western people are saying. And I'm wondering if it's true. I'm sure. That's what they say. You're not. Said if you were in Korea and being a full professor, you could actually marry in Russia. That would, those rich families, the tycoon families. Because she said professors are counted among the wealthy. So among the high class are professors, government officials, and wealthy people. At least the Korean culture that says that. And so she said, iba, not in Korea. But in Korea, I would be weird. Not here, but there. Yeah, yeah, because here, if I, if I was to, like, say, try to marry into a rich family, I'm married already, so doesn't matter. But if I try to marry into a rich family, I think they would be very sad to tell their daughter to marry and because no one equating it with Confucianism. They're all saying that, oh yeah, because Confucianism talks about something is whatever. But then Confucian philosophy is about being human, right? being human and finding the authenticity of your humanity by aligning yourself to heaven. Isn't that at the heart of Confucianism? Whatever heaven means, right? It's not happening. But heaven is where there's the me, right? It's where you orient you become a person of friend, right? Person who is fully realized, a gentleman, right? Because they're the people who are able to understand the spirit of heaven. You know what I'm saying? Here is like how, but you have, if it's even true, you have the philosophy, and then people transform it into prestige and power. That's basically how you can see that actually all this thinking about status is really about the higher person realizing the actual good. But then people, because they're so blind to the actual good and they like to live in the realm of shadows, will always translate it to wealth and prestige, right? So Jesus being and God being, our love, he loves us and all of that. But they translate that love and God's guidance and our following the will of God into becoming people of prestige and power again, right? You know how Catholics like so much to be people of prestige and power, how they like to keep their their particular understanding of Christianity. We're not the right ones, we're the only ones. Why is it important for Christians to judge Christians? I see it. Why is it that, anyway, I was just going to say the opposite, but I shouldn't. Anyway, but why are some Christians so judgmental that they say, oh, only these Christians are doing it right, only we are doing it right. So you shouldn't really mix with those people. You shouldn't even love those people because only God, we can only love God our way. And usually our way, and the reason I think is that our way is usually protecting a way of life that allows us to be either prosperous or powerful, right? Because you know what? Never mind. And then adjust it or cut them down. That's so bad. Anyway, but you know what? It's so interesting because of course there was a workers' movement. I mean, it was really a movement for like, not very prestigious people and all of that. But anyway, translate in the Philippines at least it translates into a movement of very wealthy people. And when you meet them, when you go to their places and you meet them, the way they practice their Christianity, at least according to is that and their practice is according to how rich people live. Preserving that we're the right Christians and they're the wrong Christians. Because their way of being Christians is very powerful, maybe, and that really, instead of the focus being God, they think the practice and the organization and being part of the community is being a part of a very wealthy and influential community, right? So that's why you look. Ateneo. This school was established to precisely shape young people into becoming men and women for others, as Arupe has clearly articulated. That's our mission. That's what we're about. Such a big deal. We're celebrating the 15 years anniversary of a speech, right? But it's a speech that really gave direction. And basically, I, as a faculty member, that's really what I do. I'm here because I really want to shape and basically to build the kingdom of God in each and everyone's way, right? When you go to Ateneo, most Ateneans, right? They're here either to get first of all to get the skills to be able to to get the skills to get a job which will allow them to maintain their parents' way of life or to surpass it. It's true though. I think most because even if you come in and you're a poor Athenian, most are like a middle class Athenian. Your aspiration, and that's why they're so proud of you. Oh, she's the first Athenian in family. Because the aspiration is to become a rich along with you, right? Which is what happened to me. And so will allow that. And or marry someone of that class. Because then of course you come here and you are surrounded by people of your class. That's where you meet your future husband who will, be your ticket or maybe your partner in building power and, and glory, right? But that's such a wrong reading of what Atenea is about. Because you're stuck in the realm of shadows, you can't even begin to see the good. You understand? That's the problem. That's why you know what? We teach so much philosophy and theology. Like it's I don't get any impression. But it really is a course in discernment, although secretly, okay. I mean, because sometimes theology teachers and philosophy teachers teach it. I mean, there are classes that are taught by theology teachers, but then when philosophy teachers teach it, we do the Jesuitizing secretly. But the structure of the course is so interesting because it's the 4 weeks. First, you try to make them realize that they're loved by God, then they're broken people loved by God, and then there's a war, and then, but you have to discern which side you're on. The examine and the discernment of spirits and all of that. It's really interesting. Really, because of it, even of philosophy, because I've been teaching philosophy for 35 years, and not the specialized philosophy courses. I'm talking about the very basic philosophy courses that all Athenians go through. You see a lot of them really, okay, a lot of them are touched by it and say, yeah, okay, maybe I should think this way and with this way and whatever. But a lot of them really, they don't even can't begin to understand why this is even important, right? Because I'm a management major. I need to learn business. I need to learn business ways and entrepreneurship. Why do I have to bother with this, right? Even some professors are asking, why do you so much theology and philosophy? These are psychology majors. You just need to teach them more psychology because that's the important thing. Which is because that way they become super paid. I mean, super what you call it, influential and really great achievers in the world, which is really a very big push to these days that Athenians have to be achievers, right? But then what does achievement mean? When you don't have a sense of the good, your whole self is oriented towards the shadows. And then when people start talking about, but beyond the shadows, there's a real world, and the world where all of these things are rooted, you can't even begin to see beyond the shadows or want to see beyond too public, right? So a lot of people are like, get the shot. That's such a perfect line. You know, what were you guys? Were you or when you graduate? Did you graduate from college and go straight to the society? Some of you did you? After I was straight. Yeah. How about you? Service for me. Yes. What were you? I bet it was a lucrative job. What was it a good job? Saying that because you don't want to regret trying. Are you sure you in the restaurant as a waiter? Really? So you were in the real world already? Okay. The real world balance. How about you? Where were you? Well, for 2 years. Yeah. In a real job. In the real world. Now we gotta go back. I'm sure you guys there have your own stories. Because I your life, right? When you because I got a lot of papers before. I forgot one of the papers, I don't know why, they got get a lot of papers that discuss. No, sorry. It was probably the synthesis thing. I would read some of the synthesis things. And then they would tell me about like how, yeah, I actually had a girlfriend already. We were thinking of getting married. And I already had a steady job. She had a good job. You know, they're all set up, right? Then we saw the really real. And then we like, that's true. But I think that's why most people don't want to see the real because the life in the shadows is simpler. I mean, all you have to think about is money and how to make more money. About their emotions or their development as human beings, right? Yes, and do that, and then go to this job and then just earn money. That's it. It's simple life, right? And I think that's why many people don't like that kind of thing. Okay. Yes, just it's okay. Oh, but probably after a week. Anyway, but you know what I'm saying? They had this whole process of that's why. But then, Plato's point is that if you don't see the good and live according to the good, your whole life is not realized according to the potential of fullness. Everything you see after that is in light of the real life. So understand how these things aren't fulfilling. These things aren't really good. These things aren't really the best things. So your orientation is towards doing the most real and acting in the way and investing yourself in the things that make you most real versus things that will just make you comfortable or live a luxurious life or be able to consume more things. So once you see the light, you see things from the light, see things from the light, from the brain of the light. That's one. The second thing is, that's all. There's this thing called the good for Plato that makes things according to that light. So everything is a particular realization of that light. So it's not, it's like that's why he calls it the shadow. Because it's a particular realization of that time. It's a particular realization. And not only particular, but finite and not perfect realization of that life. Okay? But all things participate in that life. So all things seek the good. All things realize the good. All things desire to realize their good. The life is the good that how they participate in the good. Every action of the good, because that also translates to what does my existence mean in light of the good. So I want to realize my existence as it participates in the good. Okay, that's the why truth is important for Socrates. Why truth is important for Socrates is because truth is a thing from which changing things come from. Okay, so we all come from the good, but we're finite, we're changing, but the good is the fullness. But later on, not later on in our class, but later on in his thinking, he also explains the soul participates in the good because it's also unchanging and perfect. It's just that while it's in this body, it's participating or somehow, flawed because it's finite. But that's why the soul seems to participate in the good because that's its true nature. Actually, I did that book, right? Not that I really close. But the last names of Socrates, right? Um, it's a I think that's past its copyright. But anyway, the last dialogue there, if you're interested, right, I mean on your own, if you're interested, you can read that because it says last list of the last essay and the last dialogue, which is Plato. This is explanation of why the soul is immortal. And that it seeks the good and it seeks to participate in the good. Okay. So basically, the philosopher is the one who recognizes, is able to, because of certain capacities and training, the philosopher is able to recognize how all things participate in the good. Okay. So this realm of the idos is the really real on which a changing reality of the world is grounded. So to realize our fullness as human beings, we must ground ourselves in the real, which is eternal and unchanging. Where's the camera of this? Is this the camera? No, this is the camera. To orient herself to the real. Temperament, because Plato really thinks some people were born for it, right? Not everyone's born for this, which doesn't say not everyone can be good or perfected. His point, though, is not everyone can have a direct openness and knowing the good. That's different from not everyone can participate in the good. Because remember, even a farmer who doesn't really know the good directly participates in the good society. That's why it's so important to build a good society. Because even the farmer, which has no temperament to philosophize, is in a good society. Yeah, good big run. Remember how the porter. Someone. Of course, the most perfect porter was Saint Alonso, Alfonso Rodriguez, right? Um, yeah, he was a Jesuit brother who was so there's a Jesuit either, but he was super um holy. He was the like the holiest one. But he was forced by his father to take over their business. But I think eventually, and then he had to marry, and then eventually his wife died. And then I think the business didn't go very well because he wasn't very good at it. But his children anyway grew up to be all right. And then when his children were grown, he finally did what his life's dream was to join the Jesuits. They joined the Jesuits. But they could accept him only as a brother because he was already too old to go through the whole training, especially theology training. Because he wasn't that smart. So they're like, you can't do the theology, I think. So you know what though? No, he was not, he was, he wasn't oriented towards academics. So they made him a brother, and then most of his life he was the porter, the guy, and the Jesuits, the guy who the people in. That he was so good at discernment of spirits, that he was the spiritual director, even of bishops and cardinals, and he was so well known for that. So 1790 became a saint. But you know what I'm saying though? That's different, right? Because at least even that was he was a saint. He was really oriented towards sainthood, right? And he was holy. But um oh sorry, another story. Do you know about um uh, anyway, there's this Austrian peasant in World War II. Do you know him? Somebody. Anyway, you want to know about it? There's a beautiful, beautiful masterpiece still called A Separate Life. And it's about him. I can transport it. I can share it. Anyway, it's about him. He was a peasant who wasn't particularly holy or religious, but then he married this woman who was very pious in a very holy way, who sort of changed him and made him part of it. Anyway, when the Nazi party took over Austria, all men were recruited to be part of the war effort to be soldiers. So he went because then he was drafted. But then after the first time he went, he realized that we just kill people and this war is not a holy war. It's not a holy thing. It's very unholy. So when he was caught, so he went home. I mean, they sent them home already because that was their true tour of 80. But when they called him up again, he refused. And then he just kept refusing. And then people were trying to convince him, just go, they'll put you in KP duty. We won't have to kill anyone. He's like, no, it's still participating in this thing that's causing people in the world. So he refused. Then they execute, oh sorry, spoiler, execute. I don't know. Anyway, I forgot his name. Yeah, okay, next time okay. But anyway, my point is, can you imagine how a peasant, without any training anyway, right? I mean, he's a farmer. He was a farmer who wasn't particularly holy anyway. But because he was part of a structure that was oriented towards the holy, right? It made him at least somehow become aware of the good, they're truly good. Although, in fact, somehow he was able to surpass his limited understanding of the good and become so directly connected to the good that he sacrificed his life, right? For that. But anyway, my point is, can you imagine that, there's for Plato, there's no discrimination. It's just that philosophers really have the temperament. Okay, not everyone has the temperament for that. So even that guy's saying for it's so it's coming. Anyway, even his sainthood was determined by the fact that there was this world that was already oriented towards the good. So his participation in it already allowed him to participate in the good in whatever way. He just was able to achieve it in a higher way. But um, but still as a peasant, that's another point. Philosophers have a different participation, you know. Just like say, if we translate it to our terms, priests would some see the good. I think that we could just have different kinds of people because they're very that they have a higher, more direct connection to the good. I think it's really a question of temperament. You know, I mean, there's no one temperament that will open to the good, but there is a kind of temperament. There's no everyone who's open to the good is like holy or very decent looking or whatever. But there are different ways that people express this orientation. But I think fundamentally, some people really have this capacity and desire, innate desire to be united to God or to the good. Sorry, not God, because this is Plato, but the good. Okay? And so he says, and that's what we see with, religious people as well. Some people really have this innate desire to achieve a higher purity of participation in the holy. It's the same with the good. There's some people, that's what the philosophy is for Plato. The person has this innate desire of a higher and deeper connectedness to the good. Okay? It's basically a temperament. So, um, his point is, remember the whole discussion on the guardians, right? For him, you have to find these people right away, from childhood. Then you have to separate them in this really kind of totalitarian child rearing method, right? Because you remember what you read, right? Where they take the guardians, the potential guardians, they raise them as one collective because being attached to one person and a parent being attached to the child and the child being attached to the parent doesn't make one love the common good. And then you train them so that they have the skills that will orient them towards the good, which is a balanced body, harmony of body and mind, capacity to play music, but at the same time, a capacity to be warriors. So you train them in basically the training of the guardians is the training of the full of the person to be excellent in all things, right? In all things that will make for a balanced and well-developed body and mind, right? And then eventually you start looking which ones of them actually begin look like they already do intuit the good itself. And then we give them that training and opening to that good, participating in that good. And then they will become, and if they really pass that test, I mean that they pass the training, then they will become the philosopher kings, right? So this is a whole group of people who have that right temperament and were trained well. The guardians are trained so that they can um, protect the city, but also with a kind of loyalty and wisdom of being people who are self-sacrificing, right? Because they own nothing, and their whole existence is there to protect the city there and to ensure that the city is capable of realizing the good while everyone else does their thing according to their proper role in that city with the proper role and order which is determined by the guardians, which is determined by the philosopher kings because it reflects the order of the good. Okay. So people will of course and rightfully complain about Plato's polis because it seems not egalitarian. For sure, it's not. Kasi he himself calls it aristocratic. Okay? It's ruled by an aristocracy. But an aristocracy that doesn't rule for itself. And that's always his point. There's no self. There's no I in ruling and in being a guardian. You have no self. You're raised as a community. You're raised to sacrifice yourself for others, and your whole orientation is the service of the community in order to bring it to the good. Right? Like priests and sisters, of course. Sister, I wasn't excluding. But like religious persons, right? You sacrifice normal, ordinary life. You're trained in order to see the good and then you hold everything in common so that, okay, except for secular priests, you're trained to hold things in common. Of course, the secular priests cannot be because they have to fend for themselves. But you hold things in common and you share things and you live in community, right? And because of that, you live for your shared community. Some people are saying, right, like the celibacy isn't the best way to be a priest. I think that's not exact. Being a married person, I think that's actually not true. I think celibacy, there's a point to celibacy because that's exactly what Plato's talking about with his guardian. Right? It's like celibacy in the sense that there's no attachment. We're trained not to be attached. Okay? Of course, if you're trusted, you're trained not to be attached. Very nice things that you won't communicate. But that's not that. But you're trained not to be attached. You're not supposed to be attached to your work. You're not supposed to be attached to your friends. You're not supposed to be attached to anything particularly. So that when your superior says, we need to deploy you here because it's where you're most needed, you just go, right? That's what the guardians are trained to be, right? People most capable of really seeing the common good and focused on the common good. Most people are not the people the people who are not, I mean the non-guardians, just everyone else, they're not trained that way. They're just what you do is basically give them the work in which they will excel and then structure the society in such a way that everyone can, in doing their work and excelling in their work, can actually participate in the realization of the good. It's basically what we do. But for you as a guardian, you really it's like you're in a different level because unlike everyone else who lives for themselves and their family, although they participate in building the shared good, you are really very focused on the communal. There's no okay. So that's why you're trained to be that way. You're trained in the way that you're raised in the way that you're separated from everyone else. That your children are raised in common, so that everyone's brothers and sisters and everyone is their mother and father, right? So that's the way it is. Then as you grow up, you just see that that your family is the community, is the police, and then you're there to protect it. And then some of you are more oriented towards the good are the ones who determine, who govern and determine. But how is it that we realize the good, right? So the polis needs a class of people oriented towards the idols. That's the whole point. It needs a class of people oriented towards the idols. And this is the class of the guardians. From them will be drawn the philosopher kings, and they will be raised apart and educated for the good. Because society can spoil the capacity to know the good and desirable, right? Plato has a very long discussion about like how, actually though, in real life, in the real world, we already see there are many people who are oriented towards the good and have the capacity to be great for them. Society's corrupted needs. And so that's why they're flattered and distracted by to realize positive lectures. Because it's like I think priests and nuns are probably, I mean, we have to just think about it this way too. But I think if you're, if you're really called to the priesthood, most people called to the priesthood are probably um smarter, deep. Okay, I don't mean maybe not the people in this way, not but they're probably seen, you probably are people who think more deeply, who feel more deeply, experience more deeply. Because why? I mean, unless you're here because you think priesthood is a good way out of poverty, which is actually true for most priests. For many priests, it is really the way out of poverty, right? In the old days, I'm not talking about now. Uh, but really, okay, I just have to thanks. Because in the early days, my first job, I was working in an NGO, but it just so happened that my NGO was into rural development. But one of the projects was to assist the diocese of something. It's a diocese with a big coastal community. Anyways, so I'm not saying what the diocese, but anyway, we were our whole job. One of our projects was to assist the diocese and to help the priests with their concerns and whatnot. It was money from Miseyor, so that was Catholic money going to the assistance. So we were trying to figure out we talk to the priest very regularly and try to understand what are your needs and how can we help you develop your parishes. Then everyone would always say, yeah, but you know what we really need? We need boats. Because we need boats. And then or gasoline and nets and things for fishing. So I finally, I'm so confused. I'm like, where next looking at for like maybe ways to develop their parish. It's like it seems like it's very focused on boats and nets. Then I asked finally one of my coworkers who was actually the one or working with the priests. He said, you know why? Because they need their guns for themselves. And that was why they're asking for boats. And yes, because then if they could like hire out their boats, then that would be additional income to what they would earn from, say, mass and stuff. Because they were poor communities. How could they earn, right? So you could understand that they needed to live. But also, these priests mostly came from even poorer communities. And their being priests was like their economic mobility upward. It's like really upward mobility for them. Not like chest, it's for not supposed to be downward mobility, right? Anyway, have you heard of that concept, downward mobility? Oh, it's a beautiful concept. The startup by a Jesuit, I think, who started to explain that as we progress in life, we should, instead of thinking that we should be upwardly mobile, like earning more money and having more things, we should be divesting ourselves of that. Because in that way, we become closer to the real good. Which is what we're talking about anyway. Right. But anyway, sorry. But my point is, the priests, right? Well, I think people who are called to the priesthood are particularly most probably don't flatter yourself, guys, but it's probably true that are called to the priesthood or the religious life are probably somewhat higher in intelligence and in discernment and in capacity like to study because you have to do theology, right? And they have to discern if you can do theology. So that's a question of a higher level of learning, intelligence, probably wisdom even or and whatnot, right? So actually the people who are going to become priests could actually be the more talented people in the community. Right? And if people, and it's the same for philosophers. People who are really actually because they're more discerning, more sensitive, more oriented towards um wisdom and actual discernment, not just discerning, but discernment, ethical about discernment. So once you see that, oh, this person is oriented, this is oriented towards philosophy, oriented towards the priesthood, what they see is all they see is the worldly talent that these people have, right? Which because being a good having the skills and the aptitude to become a good priest probably also gives you the same skills and aptitude to be a good manager, right? So that's what Plato saying here. That there are many people who are really probably going to be good philosophers, but people recognize in them the capacity to make wealth, to give prestige and whatnot, and that's why he says the potential for the philosopher-king is really ruined by society because society corrupts its best. It orients its best people towards shadow things, shadow work. like wealth creation and luxury and consumption from that. So he says that's why for him the education of the guardians and the philosopher king is very um it should be very disciplined. And the discipline is first of all the capacity to open to the first of all the being oriented towards community and service. That's the first. That's the first thing. The second thing is the capacity for service and the sense of community. And then the third thing is the openness to the good. So this have to be trained. And it will be trained if people are trained to be divested of their ego and oriented towards the good thing. So finally, Plato asks, is it possible to have a philosopher king? Is it possible to have philosopher kings? And um, well, the problem with having a philosopher king is that when we choose to be ruled, we choose to be ruled not based on the good, but based on what will easily attract or please us. That's what Plato says. So it's really a question of popularity. And because society is led by its stomach or its ego, it's easy to lead, it's easy to become the king based on the attracting of people based on their stomachs or their egos. So you flatter them or you feed them. So if there are outstanding thinkers who can discern the good, society will either try to spoil them with fame and riches, or um, they will be influenced by the mass of people to just appreciate the shallow things, right? But if there will be people who will truly retain their capacity to be philosophers, I mean, who will stay true to their openness to the good and orientation to the good, these people will never gain power or this, right? I mean, they will never be recognized because particularly societies aren't really oriented towards the good, they're oriented towards the shadows. So if there's anyone who really has an intuition and insight into into the good, they wouldn't even recognize why that's valuable. And so they don't choose those people. Um, so it makes us wonder, for instance, why is it, for instance, that um, like amongst the religious societies, um, I think it's safe enough maybe. Okay. Anyway, but please, in a lot of cases, like religious societies, it's still possible for the good to rise, right? It's still possible for the good. Oh, I know. You know what? One of my mentors in political action I was working in NGO that was concerning democracy and governance. One of my mentors there said, you know what? Politics is like a septic tank. I don't know if it's originally came from him that he says, but it did. I don't know if it originally came from him. But he kept saying, politics is like a septic tank because the shit always flirts out. I think that actually happens in a septic tank where the food initially flows, but eventually it sinks. But his point was the worst people who risk rise, right? So politics, it's always the worst people who rise. The people who don't deserve to be there, the people who don't really um ought not to be there, right? And it's usually because they're popular or they're able to manipulate power or they're able to manipulate people to vote for them. But people oriented to the good will do none of that. And plus, they'll never be popular because nobody really what they're about and what the good they will bring to a society. No one knows what good they will bring to a society, right? What good will the Socrates bring to a society? No one even knows. That's why it's almost impossible to have a philosopher. Okay. But his point is that, but this is just, he's saying, when Plato is talking about the philosopher and the whole is 42, how he understands it. He's not saying it's maybe possible. He thinks it's not going to happen. But his point is to make people aware of that idea and why it's important, right? Why it's important. But he also says, you know what, it's possible to have a philosopher-king if the conditions are right. You know, if people around you are oriented towards the good, if they've had a good education in the good, if they're capable of discerning the good, if they're people who understand why it's good or why it's important to be oriented towards the good, then it will be more possible to have a society oriented towards the good. It will be more possible to have a philosopher-king as a leader. But as it is, it's not. But you know what? I just wanted to talk about that before I went into the whole politics as a separate topic. Because you also wonder like how in the church, for instance, like in your religious community, well, okay, less in the Vatican, more in your religious communities. Because in the Vatican, it's so rare that we can okay, I'm not saying that that's so bad. But yeah, before the last post, I think it was kind of rare to actually have an actual holy man as a pope sometimes. It's like there are a lot of politics involved, and it was so sad. But then, you know, the rise of Pope Francis was a real surprise, right? A real surprise that such a good man who wasn't political was in fact so bad at politics that his own society exiled him. Right? Do you know that after he was provincial, he was such a bad provincial that the Jesuits of Argentina sent him to a very faraway seminary where he could cause no trouble for a while. It's I don't know if I feel like this, but maybe in the Philippines it's like sending me to the missionaries of Cotillion, where nobody will notice or mind what is doing things to whatever. You can't influence the society because it's so far away. Something like that. I think that's what they did with it. It was bad, because to them it was such a bad thing. Um, that is actually that still has to be studied. Because no one really knows. Because it basically was provincial during their version of Mark where there was a military dictatorship. And some people said he really handled it out how he made the Jets, how he dealt with the Jesuits who were being suppressed by the government. That was the main controversy. Anyway, but the people who defended him say he was actually part of, in fact, a very central part of a network of the Catholic underground train. There's an underground railroad for Catholics where in countries where there were dictatorships and there were priests who were wanted because they were helping the poor, they would smuggle them out into the safer countries like Mexico or even the anyway, sorry, back to the point. But you really wonder like how um like at least okay, maybe not full, but think of your own societies where you come from. I think there's a good record of actually getting good people to head these societies, right? Like well, at least in the Jesuits there was Colvin back and there was Arupe, right? Um and they were considerably great men. And then you'd wonder, okay, so these guys weren't worldly, especially Arupe. Like Arupe wasn't worldly, he was the simplest person. And I think Pope Francis also is not worldly, he's the simplest kind of person. And um you know, Colvin Bach also seemed not to be like a worldly person, but just a very simple man. But you wonder, but why did they rise to the top? They seem to be very oriented towards the holy. How come they were able to rise to the top, Plato? And he said it himself. Like if you have a society, it will be possible with a lot of luck. And also, and if this luck orients your society towards having more people oriented towards the good, or at least interested in establishing the good, then it's possible, right? Because then, so, like, you know, like as we have witnessed today, we don't have philosopher king in the Vatican, in a way, right? Maybe not. perfect, right? But you know, biggest philosopher king, we do have a philosopher king in the Catholic Church, right? Ourselves. But yeah, we do, I think. And that's a very real thing in the sense of how did we get there? Maybe because there were enough people who were oriented towards the good, to actually understood the good, or every set of interest, enough in the police, the desire to restore the police to its truth, right? So yeah, it's possible that that's how our superiors get to their position. Like the best people float up, not because in this kind of society. Oh, you know what? I think also in Ateneo, I would say my whole time in Ateneo, they fix them up, you know. But they somehow they would run things very well because you would see that their only concern was for the collective and the collective good. And the mission of Ateneo, which was to build, which was to form persons for others, right? That they were really focused on that. And you would wonder, how do these people rise up? Because you hear about other universities, right? Where the people rise up are the ones influential or powerful. You know, like in the University of the Philippines, for instance, most of the times, I think your deans would be really people who know how to play the political game and all of that. That's why when Samuel Tan became chancellor, people were surprised. He wasn't a very political person, you know. Anyway, my point is, yeah, in fact, in most universities, I think deans and vice presidents are seen as political people, right? That's why you have all these satires about deans and vice presidents in literature, especially American literature, because to rise to the top, we have to be very scheming and political and power hungry. But in Ateneo, at least in my experience, these people who rose to the top of leadership were people who were so committed to the good, seems. And my point is, guys, I'm not being an apologist. Okay, I'm just saying this is my experience. And I really, because it makes me wonder why? Why is it possible here? Why is it possible here? And I think the answer is because there's a real orientation in the population towards the good. And that's why it's easier to affirm people who are good, to rise to the top, to bring them to leadership. Because the community is in a way oriented already towards the good. That's why um they can help and they can actually allow a philosopher king to rise to leadership. So is it possible for a philosopher king to happen if by luck the philosophically inclined person is born to an influential class, right? So in other words, you can have a philosopher king in the real world. This person is already born immediately to an influential class, right? That we can see really in real society. And if somehow the society is structured or oriented to the opening to the good. So if the ideas of the philosophically minded can be embraced by a society, then that person will become can rule that society or can govern that society. But that's difficult because it means a lot of people will have to be oriented towards the good when their concern is either the need to survive, or the need to gain power and prestige, which I think is somehow tied to survival. Because then when you're powerful and you have prestige and you have wealth, it makes you feel immune from death, right? Makes you feel immune from death. So yeah, those are the things. And yeah, and if you have a population that's more comfortable to believe that um that it's okay and it's not too uncomfortable and it's not too dangerous to open to the idea of the good and to dwell in the idea of the good, then then it's possible. Like I just said, you know, like in your congregations, although I'm sure you've had evil superiors. Nonetheless, yeah, I can give you examples, I guess. Not yet. But I'm sure you've had evil superiors, right? But it's also true that more possibly, if your order is really oriented towards the holy men will rise. Diba? Not necessarily the most holy men, because maybe most holy men have no heart for administration, right? But holy men who have a heart for administration will rise, not just powerful or power hungry people. Why? Because the whole society has an orientation to the good. Now, if you want a country like that, right? You have to really be able to galvanize people. I mean, you have to really prepare people to orient their whole way of being and seeing towards the good, which I don't know how easy that is, right? Because there are moments that can happen, but there are moments that it's not possible, right? Because there's too much hold and power and influence, and people would really like to be flattered and fed, right? More than anything, okay? More than they desire to flourish as human beings. The Obama presidency was very surprising, right? Because then it seemed like it was a moral movement, like people really wanted it, not because he was such a great president, but it was like affirming good values, like affirming good values, like affirming like because he was a social justice oriented person, like he was an NGO person, and affirming the rights of people, affirming equality and social justice and all of that, and affirming the kind of governance where people would be cared for, that was running for care and healthcare and all of that. It seemed like there was a confluence of people oriented towards, right? And then they were ready to do that. And then he won, which is surprising. But you know what? In the Philippines, thing, right? Because basically, because first of all, you're running against Bongbong Marcos, who was the most evil dictator in this country, right? So everyone's thinking like, okay, first is the junior, second he has power and influence because of all the money they stole and they never returned it, and he doesn't acknowledge that they stole money or that his father was a dictator, right? He doesn't acknowledge that. So people are like, he doesn't deserve it. I mean, we could give him a chance, but he doesn't deserve it because he still thinks that what they did was a good thing, right? He should at least acknowledge that what he did wasn't the best things, that kind, at least at that level. But no, he doesn't acknowledge it, so therefore he doesn't deserve it. Plus, probably is being backed by evil people who want to exploit the Philippines yet again, okay, and want power. So that's what he stood for. But then Lenny Robredo stood for the opposite of what he was. He was not a person of power. He didn't have power. He wasn't a person who had influence in society. Although she was vice president, she was a vice president who was being oppressed by her own president. But at the same time, she stood for the right values, the values of justice, social justice, and the really stood for social justice. Most many of supporters are rich people who don't really understand social justice. All they wanted was dishes, pizza, that she doesn't curse, that she doesn't embarrass her. Like that's all they wanted. Like decency, decent like that. But she didn't realize that what she stands for is really social justice and equality. We knew this because when I was working in NGOs, she and her husband were our idols because they were able to do that in the city. They tried to establish democratic systems which allowed people to have a fair share of development. That was so impressive for us. And so we knew that her heart was there, right? Because then here you have a person who stands for the right thing. And she actually rode motorcycle, get to her she goes to understand structural and the ground level work. As a metaphor, it probably was like a sense for the philosopher-king campaign in the sense that there's someone campaigning, the leader, become the influence the group, right? Which is good for the group. This good governance for that. And then to win because his father everyone. But that didn't matter. No era. It was the time and not built in action. It's just all. But my point is, we're all deceived by that because they were focused on the shadows. They couldn't see when the good was really being brought in front of them, right? Because they would rather have the other thing. And that's why they even mocked her, right? The trolls were mocking her and they would mock her children and things like that. But my point is that even her supporters didn't even understand that she was running for the kid, right? A lot of them are just thinking, oh, we just want prestige. Because it's so embarrassing to have a president like Duterte, right? Or maybe some of them were afraid that if Marcos would come in and he'd bring in corruption and all of that, that their wealth that was built during the Aquila times would be taken back. That's what they were concerned about. Not that she stood for social justice, for the good, or building a society of justice and peace. A lot of them did, especially the women. I think a lot of the women support, the young women supporters, they're supporting her because they felt like this is it, this is our chance to build a just society, a fair society. But a lot of the older supporters were really interested in power. Nonetheless. So even our supporters of the philosopher king couldn't see the good, right? So that's my point. How can you build a society with a philosopher king? It has to have a whole majority of people really oriented towards the good because they have that level of education in the good. And what kind of society would have that? That's why Plato is extremely important because he gives us a sense of what a society should be oriented towards, the collective realization of human flourishing in our collective orientation toward realized. And the aim is to build structures such that every structure will help every person achieve that good, right? That's why Plato is important. The problem with Plato is that in order to achieve what is structured as that kind of society, because it has to be run by philosophy, first of all, you have to be sure that your philosophers are almost perfect, like flawless human beings will not be tempted by anything. So they have to be like monks, right? But even monks are perfect. But they have to have that kind of sense that they have to be totally oriented towards the good. And that means, creating an artificial educational system, an educational nurturing system, and it's all artificial. And how can you actually sustain that in a real world situation? Plus, let's say you really have guardians who are raised that way. Would they even really be able to govern actual people? Because they don't know how actual people live. Right? It's like how priests always tell people how to be good. That's easy for you, Father. You live in the convent, right? But we don't know how it is here in the real world every day. Like, what is that? Will there actually be a world like that? That's why I think Plato's Republic is an allegory, maybe of maybe it's possible to have well-governed humans, just humans, the way he described it. But it's an allegory that helps us understand what a society aims for, but not actually how to achieve it. Okay? Because it's not realistic and it's not possible. Now, in the next few classes, I'll try to provide you with, okay, not exactly how to realize, but at least the closest we can come to in a flawed world of human beings. All right? Okay. 5 minutes, but we don't want to do that. We can go now. Bye, guys. Yeah. Bye. You go before it rains and you get wet. You guys too. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, bye.
Bye
See
bye.
you.
See you
Bye.
po.
See you.
See you.
See you. Bye.